everybody. Today I wanted to talk about one of the 4 principles, I like to call them, of weight wellness. Those 4 principles are aligning with nature, focusing on the root cause, recognizing the mind-body-spirit connection and how that plays in, and our body's desire to be well. So today I wanted to focus on aligning with nature. I feel like if we use this as a lens, that it can really help us take out some of the complexity of things and focus on sort of the macro picture of our wellness when it comes to weight. So I'm going to give 3 examples of ways we can align better with nature that will help us with our weight management and our wellness. And the first one I'll start with, which is food. When we think about food, there's so many diet plans out there. There's so many different ways of eating. And there's really not one right diet. And we can tell by just looking at people around the world and the different types of food that people eat, that there are many ways to eat that can still promote health. And so there's not a certain food, there's not a certain collection of foods that are best for us. It's really about how well aligned with nature our diets are. And let me tell you what I mean by that. So we know that there are a spectrum of foods, from whole foods to somewhat processed to moderately processed to ultra processed, right? So an example would be an apple is a whole food, but if we change it into applesauce, it's processed. If we make it applesauce with added sugar, that's even more processed, moderately processed. Or if we change that apple into a gummy fruit snack with sugar and color and whatever else, that's an ultra processed food. So there's a spectrum, right? And I think if we can focus on staying as much as we can to that whole food side of the spectrum and looking at the way we eat through that lens, how close to nature are these foods? Am I eating mostly whole and mostly minimally processed foods and keeping those processed foods to a minimum? If we just do that, it would make a huge difference, and we wouldn't have to worry so much about all the minute details. We know people hundreds of years ago had no idea what a macro was, what a carbohydrate was. They just ate food, right? And it was mostly whole foods because they didn't have processed foods. So if we can think about it that way, I think it's going to make a huge difference. And let me give you an example too I just found this study, and I'll link the description down below to the study. A couple of years ago, they took 20 people, and these are people that are weight stable, so they're not trying to lose weight or gain weight, and they put them in a clinical research unit for 28 days. And for 2 weeks of those 28 days, the people would eat a highly processed diet. And for 2 weeks, they would eat an unprocessed diet. But the interesting thing about it is that the food that they gave the participants was equal in the number of calories, in the amount of sugar and fat and fiber and macros. And they told the participants to eat whatever they wanted, however much they wanted of the food. And for the 28 days, for 2 weeks, they would eat the ultra processed diet, and for 2 weeks, they would eat the unprocessed diet. And here's what they found. It's so interesting. On average, the people eating the ultra processed diets ate 500 calories per day more than the unprocessed group. And it wasn't because they thought that food was so much better, because they asked them, how did it look to them? What was their interest in the food? And it was almost equivalent from the unprocessed to the ultra processed. So they were just as appealing, it was appealing to them as just as much to eat the unprocessed food as it was the highly processed food. And not only did they eat more, but obviously by eating more calories, the people on the highly processed food gained about 1 kilogram, while the people on the unprocessed diet lost about 1 kilogram. So significant difference there. So I think this study tells us a lot in that if we just do that one simple thing of focusing on, whole and minimally processed foods, we're just naturally automatically going to eat less calories, and we know it's better for us. So that's just the first example of aligning with nature to give our bodies what it wants. Number 2 is sleep. So thinking about sleep, we kind of take our modern world for granted in a lot of ways, and we think it's just normal. It's normal to wake up with an alarm clock. It's normal to have lights on in the evening. But if you think about it, we are so used to artificial light in our homes and staying and having light until the moment typically that we go to sleep. We wake up for our alarm clocks, and we wonder why we're not getting enough sleep, right? Because we're not letting our rhythms sort of drive our sleep patterns. So we know that this is really impacting our sleep rhythms. We're not letting our sleep rhythms drive it. We are driving it by having light and not letting our brain sort of go into its functions that it normally would if we didn't have bright light and screens in front of us all night, and interrupting that sleep cycle by using an alarm clock. So it's no wonder that our sleep isn't as good as it could be. It's probably, it's shorter, and it may not be as good of a quality as it can be. And yes, we still have to get to our jobs on time. And yes, there are certain things that this, world and time demands. But how can we recognize those things and make small tweaks to promote better sleep? Because we know that sleep is so essential to maintaining good weight. If we don't get enough sleep, we get increased hunger, and our body is not as restored as it could be. So can we use blue light blocker glasses? Can we shut down lights before we start to get ready to go to sleep? Can we promote sleeping in when we can? So what are the things that you can do to help align your body for a better sleep pattern? So number 3 is outside, physical environment. We know that so many of us are vitamin D deficient, and it's because we spend so much time indoors these days. We're not outside every day. We're not getting the vitamin D from the sunlight. Vitamin D can play a role in a number of things. If we are deficient, it can make us increase depression, increase fatigue. It makes us at higher risk for infection, and there even is some evidence too that a deficient vitamin D can impact your weight. So can we get outside a little bit more? Can we get that sunlight? Can we increase our vitamin D? And not only that, is that we know that there is a calming effect of just being in nature. If you haven't heard about forest bathing, look that up. There are definitely health benefits just by spending time outside in nature. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, and tell me what you think down in the comments below. Have you thought about it from this perspective? How are you aligning with nature to promote your best wellness? Tell me all the things. I'd love to hear from you. And before you go, would you give this video a thumbs up if you like this content? Subscribe, ding the little bell if you haven't already, so you can keep up to date with new videos. And until next time, be well.